Okay, so let me, again, I just want to sort of give my standard sort of information that I give, and y'all please feel free to interrupt me with questions or comments or, whatever y'all need to know specifically. But I'll speak from my experience with teaching and what I have found works well. I think, so if I'm starting with prep, how you get ready for a reacting game, I think the syllabus needs to be really, really clear. You have to be very clear that you're playing a game and clear about what the requirements of the game are up front. That includes being clear about the dates and times. It includes being clear about how this is going to be a probably more work intensive assignment than they're used to, that it's a different form of learning. And I think as well with online students, one of the things that I found that's necessary is to allow for some flexibility on their schedules. And so to upfront have some sort of survey for them during the first week. So have your schedule planned out and have whenever you are going to be doing the game. And I'll kind of talk about how I've done scheduling. Normally I run games during 1 week of the class. We have 9-week terms, so everything is very compressed. But let me apologize in advance. I have lots of animals and they will probably be coming.
I think we all have that problem.
For the cat? Move. Okay. He's looking at the monitor. Okay, lie down. Okay, so a survey done during the first week of class, which might, include scheduling conflicts. For example, I had a firefighter who, during the time I was scheduling the game, he wasn't able to do something during the first part of the week because he was going to be on call at the firehouse. So I made sure that he was a character that wasn't going to be there, have to be there then. I've had active duty military who might not have had internet access at certain times. So making sure that you're aware if they have scheduling conflicts early on is helpful, especially in assigning roles. But a lot of professors have also been doing surveys to sort of get an idea of their students before assigning roles, what they like to do, what they don't like to do, what they're comfortable with or not comfortable with, how they respond themselves personally to difficulties or failure or those kinds of things, just to get a sense of who they are early on. You do have to be thinking about accommodations early on. And hopefully your students will have given you that information early on, but some of them can't speak in public, or some there are certain things that they're unable to do, or they need more time to do things or whatever. And then what you also have to be flexible with is thinking about particularly how students might need an alternative assignment. Like I said, I've had students who are active duty military who are going to be, on duty during that week. They were going to be deployed and they were not going to have regular internet access. So I've had to sort of come up with different assignments for them. One of them I assigned to be a reporter, and so after the game she was kind of looking back to see what was happening. But again, sort of in that prep work and in that first week, you're going to need to try to get an idea of that. I think too, the second thing, so the syllabus and survey, but the other thing too is that you are very, very clear with them to explain the pedagogy, to be very explicit about why they are doing what they're doing. Where you are, even if it's like a video or something that you could put online, being very explicit about what they are doing and why they are doing it and how it is helping. And I would do this multiple times. Do it in the syllabus, do it in a video for prep for the game, do it sort of randomly in an email, because, and I'll sort of talk about what pushback you're going to expect. I've been getting over and over again. But Also, what I think is important is to remind the students that their feelings of worry or their feelings of sort of anxiety about the game are normal and okay, that everyone is experiencing that it's understandable and normal, and that the game will be kind of crazy at first, and that's okay and normal too, because some of them are going to be very freaked out about doing something different. And interestingly, you'll find the very, very bright students will sometimes be the ones who are the most freaked out about it. They've gotten used to, hey, I'm really good at taking notes and memorizing and spitting things out, and now they're having to do something completely different, and that's, disturbing to them. So syllabus is clear. Try to get some sort of survey out to your students. Be explicit about the pedagogy. I have also tried to, and sometimes this is explicit. In other words, I tell students what I'm doing, and sometimes I don't. We'll just do assignments, and it will be building up for them. Do some scaffolding assignments for the game. In other words, if they're going to be doing speeches, maybe have them do a little speech, before the week before the game starts on whatever topic you're on that week. That would help them get used to the audio software. It will help them get used to making a speech. You can sort of give them some direction about how to do that. But try to have them do some smaller assignments that will help them with the skills that they need in the game. And I don't know how, I don't know what level your students are at. Cisco. I don't know what level y'all students are at, but we have a lot of first generation kids. We have a lot of students who, come out of Alabama schools completely unprepared for anything, let alone college. So they need a lot of kind of help doing that. So anything like where they can read a primary document and, do some commentary on it or critical analysis, or try to get them to think about different sides of arguments, anything that you see that's happening in the game that you can build in beforehand to help them with those skills is really, really helpful as well.
So Scout?
Yes.
Yeah. So do you have them video their speeches then?
I have the choice for them. They may video it if they want. Normally I tell them to audio record because it's a little easier and more straightforward for them to be able to do that.
Right. Okay.
And I'll tell y'all, I've got a software that I use. I'll run down sort of what I have found is helpful.
Okay.
Yes. The speeches themselves, I require that they do them audio. They're also required to do a written copy and turn that in at the same time. One of the reasons I do that, and I'll mention it again later, but one of the reasons that I do that is because, one, I want them to start ahead of time, and writing it down makes them start ahead of time. That they're not just, off the cuff sort of making the speech and then, posting it. But also it saves some problems. Like before I was doing the written copy at the same time, I had a student who turned in the audio copy and it was completely inaudible. It was just this mess of noise for like 3 minutes. And I contacted him and I said, hey, I can't understand your audio. Can you repost for me? I think it just got garbled. A day passes, and I reminded him and I told him, why don't you go ahead and send me a written copy. His written copy was like, 3 lines long, and he never posted the audio again. So to me, having it that way sort of prevents some of the problems with, making sure that they're doing the work and not saying, oh, my computer just got messed up or something. So I think it's also really important, what I've found is to remind them why they're doing the assignments in the game, as well as, here, we're doing this assignment to make sure that you know how to critically analyze a document. Or you can say, hey, remember our assignment in week 2, you were critically analyzing a document. That's exactly what we're doing here at this point in the game, or something like that. So to remind them that they've already done stuff that can help them with the game is important. One of the things that's really hard is that, feedback for these assignments needs to be quick. And it's really important that for those scaffolded assignments, when you provide that feedback, that they also read it. I have a lot of examples where I'm, giving feedback and the students don't read it or pay attention to it at all. So normally now I'll have Easter eggs within my comments. Once you've read this, send me an email with the word blah, 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 or send me a picture of something, and then you'll get 10 bonus points. So that you can begin to reinforce that idea of, hey, what I'm telling you is important and you need to react to it and you need to, do something with it. I've had to remind students about how to get into comments with Canvas, or we used Blackboard previously. Okay, so that's kind of prep work before the game or outside the game. Prior to the game beginning, one of the biggest things that you can do about the game itself is to have them be comfortable with the content, with content knowledge, and with what's the documents in the game. In other words, you should have some sort of lecture or reading or something so that they can know about, if you're doing the Athens game, they should have some readings about Athens, or you should go over the core readings in a discussion board so that they have that knowledge and they're not doing all of that by themselves. I assess a lot. And sometimes it's just a incomplete kind of grade, but I do an enormous amount of assessment pre-game to push them, to make them do some of the work. So I'll have a lecture that they're supposed to listen to, and then a brief, 5 or 10 question quiz over the lecture content, or a quiz over the reading, or a survey where they talk to me about the basics of their character, or written assignments where they talk about their character's views on something, or different kinds of assignments prior to the game so that they're preparing for the game. A lot of instructors find that students don't do much prep work at all until the game begins, and that's part of the reason why they get so immensely confused when the game starts. So making sure that they have that foundation is really necessary. I've also, this of course depends on the time of your class, the size of your class. I've also had meetings individually with students, via Skype or whatever, with online classes, and had them, said, do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? Here's what you need to be doing, and sort of done that as well. Okay, so that's basically sort of what I do with prep. That you have to have sort of the syllabus and explaining the pedagogy, preparing them for the work, and then making sure they're ready for the game itself. That's basically the build-up. For the setup for the game, like I mentioned a minute ago, the scheduling for the game, we have 9-week terms. It's really, really compressed. And so I normally just have a 1-week format for the game. You can also do it where you have, it depends on the topic of your class. You could have multiple weekends where you're doing, like, day 1 of the game would be one weekend, and then day 2 would be the next weekend, or day 3. So you can do it in that kind of format as well. Again, you have to be really, really aware of their schedules, because a lot of them are taking online classes because they can't, they have a weird schedule, or they can't do things at the drop of a hat. So I always schedule, if a game has a meeting or a debate, you have to have multiple days for that. You can't just have that happening in 1 hour. That has to be happening over, I allow at least a 48-hour period for those kinds of things. Be very, very clear with them about what happens when. In other words, okay, Monday and Tuesday, we're going to be doing this debate on this. Tuesday or Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to be doing this. So make sure that they're very aware about exactly what's going on when. Send them a schedule about that kind of stuff too. A lot of our reacting games are very kind of freewheeling. In other words, it's sort of like, hey, we're going to have a debate on this, and whatever we did last time, we're going to do more of that this day. You may want to make the game a bit less like that and have, okay, today we're going to discuss the role of women during the American Revolution. Tomorrow we're going to just, have it be a bit more structured. I found that sometimes helps too, just so that they know what's coming up and that they can get ready. One thing too is that students have to be aware, if you're doing it this way, that they have to work throughout the week, that they cannot just work on Sunday night, and that there are assignments due throughout the week. And that's one of the reasons why I say you've got to start with like the first day of class, notifying them that that's the case. They have to respond to actions. They have to keep connected during the week. It's not just to post something Sunday night and you're done with it. So that's something really important too. I found a lot of different ways to do the content material. In other words, like if you're studying the French Revolution, how do you teach the French Revolution during the game? I've had parallel stuff going on. So like we'll have the game going on, and then we'll also have discussion boards about what was really going on or some issues during the game or whatever. So I've had sort of a parallel kind of thing. I've also done that in a debrief. So we'll have an activity afterwards, or a lecture or a discussion about, hey, here's what really happened. Why was ours different? Those kinds of things. It is really, really important to, well, this probably goes after the game, but it's really important to make sure that you're getting their feedback on how they felt about the game and how they did, and what value they saw in the game as well. Matthew was asking about methods and format. I use our learning management system for initial content and setup. So quizzes, lectures, directions, posting stuff, I put all of that on the content system. I would absolutely not ever again use use Canvas or Blackboard for the gameplay itself. Canvas and Blackboard, they don't allow for the students to post as their characters. Like if you have a discussion board for the game that you're using, that they have to post under their own names. And that is incredibly difficult to sort of stay in character and stay in the game, especially if students forget to sign their character's name, so other students have no idea who is being what. So the gameplay itself, I would really recommend that Slack be used. Slack is an amazing site it's basically sort of a work chat site sort of thing, but it's really, really a good thing to use, and it allows for the students to sign up and be in character, so it helps them stay in the moment a lot more, and you're not like, oh, is that Tom Smith or is that the character? They don't have that kind of confusion. It allows for, you do have to give them very explicit instructions about how to sign up and make sure they sign up well ahead of time. But it allows for posting of attachments. It allows for private spaces to be set up for the factions to meet, or for you to message them privately. I use an audio software. Like I said, I make them do their speeches, audio or video. Most of them do audio. They don't want to do video for some reason, but I use a software called Audacity. And it's pretty simple to use and pretty easy, and it can export to a lot of different formats. So I've been happy with Audacity.
It's free too.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's important, right? We don't, I wouldn't ask them to do sort of buy something. And then probably the last part of prep and getting ready is to make sure that the students have a list of who's playing who, so that there's a central place of, John Smith is playing King Louis, so that they know who they're contacting and that kind of stuff. Okay, so playing the game. Feel free to adapt the games. And the designers are fine with this. We have to adapt them to our own classes and our own class needs. So again, feel free to sort of adapt them if you just want to do part of them or just want to do one argument or one discussion, that's perfectly fine. Figure out what you need to do. One of the biggest things, this is not just online, think about how you're going to organize the material coming in and out prior to the game starting. How you're going to handle workflow and how you're going to deal with what's going on in the game quickly, because it can be a lot depending on the size of the class, and it can be kind of intimidating. I think overall what's hardest again is feedback, and making sure that your feedback is really timely. If they have an assignment due on a Wednesday and you don't get feedback until the next Wednesday and the game ends on Sunday, that's not going to help them. So the hardest thing for me tends to be that immediate turnaround that you have to have with feedback for them. Hey, that was a really good speech, or hey, you need to remember that you need to put quotes from the documents in, or you need to engage with the documents more. So giving them that and saying, hey, why don't you do your speech over again, or doing something like that is hard, but it's probably one of the most important things. Don't feel bad about stepping in as game master to give your players some nudges, or to give them hints, or to try to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. That doesn't mean sort of hover over them every second, but if someone does something that's really out of character, or really out of time period, you should say something to them, and say, look, no one during the American Revolution, no white man during the American Revolution would have allowed women to vote, or something like that. So just make sure that they stay in character and in the time period, and don't feel bad about intervening with that specific character, or whatever, to try to fend off some things. One thing that I have found very helpful for me is a game journal during the game, having the students do a game journal during the game. In other words, at the end of each day, they have to submit just 2 or 3 sentences about what they did, or at the end of each meeting, 2 or 3 sentences about what they did, because sometimes I'm not seeing everything that they're doing. So the game journal during the game is helpful, just for me to kind of keep track.
And do you use your LMS for that?
For submitting assignments?
Yes. Journal. Yeah. Okay.
Some things, and then at the end of the game, of course, the debrief is really important, or however you sort of handle the ending, to make sure that they understand that, they understand what happened in the game, what happened in real history, and why they went off, and why that's really important to figure out. Okay, this is some blowback that you're going to get in various forms and various degrees, and some of it is not different from what you would get in a regular, in an on-campus class. Some of it is, but if you prepare for it ahead of time, I think it can be a little easier to sort of head off. There was a really neat article in Inside Higher Ed, like in the past couple of weeks, that was talking about how students view passive learning as teaching them more. In other words, students, if they heard a really good lecture, they thought they learned a whole bunch. When they did active learning, they were actually learning more, but they didn't like it, and they didn't think they learned as much, because active learning was a lot more, it was less structured, it was a bit more confusing, it's not something they're used to. So students tend to like very passive learning, and you will get a lot of, I prefer lecture. Yeah. I just want lecture. Why can't I just have lecture? They want that passive learning, and they don't sometimes understand that they get so much more out of the active experience. I've done surveys with my online students quite frequently, and one thing that I get, which was sort of surprising to me in a way, although it shouldn't have been, I suppose, some online students are in online classes to not interact.
Right.
They are there to not, and I don't mean just with other students. They don't want to mess with other students. They don't want to mess with the professor. And right. They think that it's an imposition to have to interact with professors. So some of those students you'll hear from too, that they just don't want to be doing anything like this. I think going along with that as well, some students have had experience with kind of poorly designed online classes where it's basically read a chapter, do a quiz. That's all you do. You know, the quizzes are all graded by the, you know, Canvas. So you pretty much never, they have discussion boards, but the instructor never does anything with them. You know, they don't even look at them. So, you know, sometimes students have had experience with those and have, you know, that's what they think of as normal or, you know, appropriate, and anything else is not. Online students are often very oversubscribed. You know, I get a lot of, I can't do this because I'm a single parent with 3 kids and 3 jobs and I don't have time for this. I've literally gotten emails like that. You know, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time. I can only do this Saturday night at midnight or something. So you'll have to deal with that, I mean, those kinds of comments. You will have to deal with some students who feel that games are not appropriate for learning. I paid for this class and I shouldn't be playing games, you know, that sort of thing. Again, one of the things that you need to be clear of is the pedagogy and why you're doing it and the benefits of it and stuff. It is hard for students to take on different roles and to accept different points of view. I mean, that's just, you know, something that's kind of difficult for them. The competitive aspects of the game are hard, and they make the students work harder, and that can generate some resentment as well. And they can complain about that. That they're not happy about having to do that, and especially having to do it over the week if they're just used to taking an online class that requires them to do nothing except Saturday, you know, night at midnight. So those are kind of the problems. Another problem that I face quite frequently is that with all that blowback, sometimes students will vote with their feet. In other words, they will just not show up. I have had students who are, you know, they are throughout the class, they do everything, but the game of the week, they're just vacant. They just don't show up. They just skip it, which is really bad for their grade because normally I make it about 20 to 25% of their grade. So, I mean, a 0 there dramatically affects things. I normally contact people who aren't getting engaged earlier just to make sure, but sometimes it doesn't. Positive results. I'll end on something positive. You do see, I do see generally much greater engagement than I do with discussion boards. The level of participation and the number of posts goes up. I see just what I see in traditional classes where there's increased empathy, where they are learning more about a character, where they are getting deeper into things, you know, so I'm getting a lot of that similar feedback that you get from on campus. I have, and I'll post this on the Reacting site. I posted a link over on the chat thing. That is a Google folder which has a whole bunch of documents and stuff that I use, as well as sort of the outline that I've just been chatting to y'all about. But it has a whole lot of documents that I use pre, during, post game, just to give y'all some additional examples to use. Or things to sort of go by, you know, that I've been talking about. So that's about all I have. So what can I do for y'all? Y'all have questions, anything?
Well, I think I do have a few. I've created a little bit of it's more like a debate, a full-blown game for one of my classes that I have run successfully and unsuccessfully in our summer, which are 8 weeks, so kind of similar to you. And I think Matt and I teach at an institution with several, same kind of thing. We're open enrollment. We're the cheapest place in town, you know, so we have a lot of students, diversity issues across many criteria, and 50% or more are first gen, and a lot of veterans coming back to school and retooling themselves. It does concern me to hear you say that you have students who vote with their feet. And how do you handle, you know, the dynamics if say even 25% of your students then vote with their feet or they drop because you've assigned them particular roles. And then you also have administrators who are wondering why you have students either with low retention or however you want to describe that.
Yeah. So one of the things that might be helpful is to talk to your chairs and your deans, and kind of do it in sort of informally at lunch, talk to them about this pedagogy that you're using and the benefits of it and how you're excited about it, sort of try to build some of that framework up front. I've had a really supportive group of people, and we actually invited some of our deans and vice chancellors in to play the games, and so they got really, they were interested in them too, and sort of saw how the students were reacting in class. So try to build a little bit of that goodwill up, or at least let them know what you're doing. And maybe, if you feel it's necessary, sort of keep them up to date. Hey, here's what was going on, that sort of stuff. How you deal with it in game, you have to be very flexible. The point of the games very much can be sometimes that history is made by people who show up. And so very, very different things can happen if, your King Louis doesn't show up or whatever, right? And that is really key that I talk to them about a lot. I had a character who was an excellent student, just really, really good student. And I had assigned him in a leading role in the civil rights game. And he was kind of, a leading civil rights figure, sort of based on Martin Luther King. And he just didn't come at all. So this one little faction had no formal leadership. But what happened was kind of interesting, is that another person sort of stepped up to be in that role and to sort of reorient the discussion a bit. So the absence of that character produced different results, which was also which was cool. And we could talk about it, what happened because of the absence of so-and-so. And sometimes what I've also done is I've inserted myself into the game sometimes. Like, we had this one, I have a civil rights game that I designed explicitly for online. And it has like Martin Luther King people. It has like the student workers, like SNCC workers and stuff, student activists. And then it also has like a Black Panther kind of group. And one of the Black Panther group quit appearing. He made a speech and then that was all. And so what I announced was that his character had been found murdered on the side of the road or something. So, that he was now dead. And I sent an email to the student telling him, you're dead now and you're going to have to be another character or do something else. He never responded. He completely dropped out of the class. But but I told the characters that something had happened to him and that, he had been found beaten up and, bloodied and dead by the side of the road. And that galvanized the game. It proved to be sort of a big point for how they were acting and their radicalization during the game. So we were able to talk about Emmett Till and afterwards and sort of some of those other kinds of events. So count on some people leaving, count on some very important people leaving, and just be able to adapt and understand that it's okay. If they don't show up, that's fine. The game will go on without them.
Yeah.
It'll go on in a different direction, but it'll go on without them. So.
Okay.
Scout,
yes, sir.
With the in-class stuff, I think it definitely works really well. I guess my biggest concern about the online is how do you deal with the asynchronous nature of it? How do you, especially in a short format like that in a week, how do you make sure that, whatever's supposed to happen on day one gets done?
So if a game has something on, if the game has a schedule, so it says day one, this happens, I will schedule day one to be over a 48-hour period. Okay. And so whoever is involved in day one has to contribute or do their speeches or contribute to the debate over that 48-hour period. So it's not synchronous in that they're yelling back and forth at each other, they have a little bit more time to think and, digest and react. But I found that 48-hour period to be really useful because of their weird schedules sometimes and because of their other commitments, that you just need that additional time. So rather than having, from 5 to 6 p.m., we're going to do this, it's a 48-hour period where they're contributing to that, basically.
A couple of questions for me, just kind of on details. You place your game at the end of the semester or end of the term, or have you played around with placement of the game? Is it a factor in how you? I guess the question is, do you give consideration to where you place the game in the course of the semester?
Yes.
And which games for which classes? We have most of our online offerings right now are lower division general education, general studies kinds of courses, which is a different kind of student. I play some games at the upper division level, which has a different dynamic.
So let me answer the when in the semester. I think partially that depends on what class you're teaching. If you're teaching a survey, then it depends on what game you're doing. Ideally, I prefer the games to be in the second half of the class, just for me, because what I found is that helps me scaffold a little better.
Yeah.
It helps me get to know the kids a little better. Now, there are lots of professors, I don't know if anyone's doing this online, but there are lots of professors who do multiple games.
Okay.
And so they get to know the students better through the games early on. Games are really intense and really a lot of work for us and for them. So to me, doing multiple games in a 9-week period might be, or an 8-week period, just might be a bit much.
Right.
So I tend to like them in the latter half of the class. I have done them earlier, and what was really interesting is that there was, kind of a medium level of participation in the discussion boards before, and then like about 3 times or 4 times the participation during the game week, but that did not translate over to the rest of the class. So after the game, it wasn't like there was more participation in the traditional discussion boards. So, and that's just anecdotal. I haven't really, I think I just did those numbers in one class. But I didn't see that kind of spilling over into the more when you went back to the traditional assignments. So, but again, if you want to do a game on Anne Hutchinson, during your American history class, that might kind of have to come
right
at the beginning. And I don't think it's a bad thing to do at the beginning. I think it, can kind of wake them up, and it might mean that you'll have more students, who haven't just fallen off. I have a lot of students in my online classes who just quit at various times. Yeah. So that's when. What games? There are very, very few games that have any kind of online component sort of spelled out in the instructor's manual.
Right.
That has been, until recently, something reacting has been kind of resistant to. I was on the board for a while, and I think, that was one of my goals, was to try to sort of help them overcome that resistance to online learning and to understand that online students need this kind of learning too. So they're more accepting of it now, but the games tend to not be designed with online classes in mind. I've done the civil rights game, which was specifically designed to be used in my online classes. But all of the games, like I've got one on Teapot Dome, which was a presidential scandal during the 1920s. I've got a game on that, and that I've used online. All of the games I think can be used online. It just depends on how you need them and how experienced you are with reacting. Like the French Rev game can take like 6 weeks.
Right.
I mean, and that's silly, unless you're teaching a class on a French Rev, I suppose. So, if you're experienced with reacting and can condense that down to maybe 1 or 2 issues, then that would be fine too. I think any of the games could be adapted that way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. But you know about the blorg, right? The
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
Okay.
It does take a lot of work to try and figure out the dynamics online versus, trying it. I feel like I need to try it face to face before I can take it up a notch.
Yes. I have always done that. I've
Okay.
always done it face to face first. That helps me see the roadblocks.
Okay.
And, sort of what can be cut out and what can't. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I teach over at California State University, Sacramento, and I am doing French Revolution, and it's a hybrid course, and this is the first time I'm teaching it, so I'm very challenged. But I have Terry. I don't know if you know Terry Nelson.
Yes.
Okay, she has been helping me out. Yeah,
She's so wonderful.
Absolutely. So actually, we're playing the game the entire semester. It's an upper division French civilization course. So I've been, we don't start the game till week 5. But anyway, I'm using Slack, and I'm noticing I'm having a lot of problems getting students to get engaged in Slack. They kind of signed up, but they're not really there. And I keep trying to give them kind of like, little Easter, hey, answer some questions that I'm throwing out, and how do you get them excited about Slack? And then also, what about the audio? Did you have them put their speeches, the audio in Slack? And
yes.
And do they discuss the speeches after somebody gives it within Slack itself?
Yes.
And then you do the grade in Canvas.
Yes.
Okay.
So the grade is in Canvas, yes. And so what normally so I have them post, now this is what I'm doing. I have them post the speech, and then I also make sure that the written copy is available just in case I have a student who is hard of hearing or, has difficulty with that. So just in case I need to give that to that student, but they post the speech, and then I allow them to respond or ask questions. They can either do that in an audio file too. So I have another audio file where they make, if it's some sort of comment they're making, or they can respond with, typing it. So, yeah, I mean, I let them have the option of doing that, except for their speeches, which have to be an audio file or a video file. About the point of getting them engaged in Slack, I mean, a lot of these kids have a lot of different apps that they're on, GroupMe and Discord and 20 different ones. So getting them involved over a long time period with a new one, I agree. I mean, it can be kind of challenging. I'm wondering if it might help to, literally have an assignment there about the game, or getting, having some of this stuff about preparing and getting ready for the game. Hey, there's have a channel that's just for lectures or something that you post, you do an audio lecture about something real quick, or and then you have a channel that's lectures, and you will post that and then ask them some questions. But if you're wanting them to get more engaged, maybe force them into, make them go to the Slack site for content, maybe.
Yeah, well, I'm having them post their newspapers.
Okay.
So I guess I'm just trying to figure out, because you are also using Canvas, do I want to use the discussion board over in Canvas because I'm asking them to video their speeches. And so I'm just trying to figure out, do they discuss there, or do they go over to Slack and discuss, or is that going to just throw everyone off going, where am I supposed to be?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the problem, right? When when you have content that they're supposed to be mastering as well as the game, there's kind of this, but they're not actually playing the game right now, right?
No, not yeah, I just gave them their characters. So
yeah, I mean, you might want to sort of say, hey, introduce yourself to the assembly or whatever, have them do something small. I don't know. I'm not sure that any of my classes have participated in stuff beforehand. They don't participate until they get started with the game. I would keep content stuff, real stuff, on Canvas, and the game on Slack.
Okay.
I mean, that's just how I would handle it. But yeah, I know it's a problem. I mean, getting them to engage when they're not forced into it is difficult.
Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit more about that? Like with the French Revolution game, or what I was thinking is maybe the Athens game. When you go to Slack, you said that you can. I'm vaguely familiar with that with Slack, that you can have their names be the character names
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. Do you set up spaces, virtual spaces, like this is the assembly and this is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So Slack, you can set up different channels to do things. There's a general channel that everyone's in at the beginning. So you could use that if there's a space where everybody is at. But then like I set up channels for the different factions so that they can go in and privately talk within their factions and secretly plot or do whatever they're going to do. So yeah, you can set up different spaces for them. Or like if there are some games where, a group like there's the Chicago game where sometimes there's a faction or not a whole faction, but different people who can go off and discuss an issue, but they're by themselves. They're sort of doing it secretly. So I might set up a space for that and only invite those people to it. So yeah, you set up separate on Slack. You can set up separate channels within the site. They're on the same site, but you just push a different button to go somewhere else. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I'm definitely getting that impression. I was talking to my instructional designer, and they talked to their team, and they were really excited about this whole prospect until they started trying to figure out how to do it on Blackboard, and then they were okay. This is probably not going to work, at least not the way you want it to. So the Slack must be the way to go.
Yes. Yes. Or you don't have to use Slack. There are other chat sites like that out there.
Okay.
But I have found that Slack is the best one, and sometimes our university will they cut off or they restrict our use of different things. Like Discord is another one like Slack, but we can't get that on campus. They've banned that on campus for some reason. And so yeah, Slack to me. And it's also good because, in a game, you're supposed to be going to a different space. You're supposed to be sort of being in a different place.
Right.
And I think online, that's one way to signal that to the kids. Hey, we're doing something different here. I'm going to post that link to the Google folder on the Reacting site and ask, we've got a lot of other instructors too who do Reacting online. So that they can add to it. And hopefully this will sort of become kind of a living site.
Okay.
Living, breathing kind of thing. But I'm really glad that y'all asked to do this because it sort of gave me an opportunity to get all this together and do this for people that have been asking about it. So
I really appreciate it, and also, it's both exciting me and terrifying me at the same time.
I can second that. It's a little daunting. It's already daunting to do it in face-to-face classes, but I appreciate you talking about the positives about it, and I think our online students, need that kind of skill development that RTTP creates. It's just really terrifying for me as I'm juggling all the different components of online teaching or online learning.
Yeah, it is, to me, the daunting thing is just the amount of work that's required on my end, to get everything ready and to try to get the detailed instructions down. Okay, here's what you do with, the audio, and here's how you get onto Slack, and to get all of those pieces together, it's just really intimidating and kind of it's enormous amount. Once you've done it once and once you've gotten it set up, it's much easier. It flows much easier. So bear that in mind too. It's going to be like a new course prep sort of
Yeah.
the first time.
Have you presented this at the annual meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Although I should probably do it again at some point. I did it in 2015. Was the last time.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be really useful.
I agree with you. I probably do need to do that. I managed to
Some of us start jumping into this deep end of the pool, then we also would probably have more informed questions for you.
Well, if y'all have any questions, if you have stuff that comes up and you're not sure how to deal with it, or, please feel free to ask, or put a question on the Reacting Lounge. There are lots of people who can help. And I'm sure, if y'all have been on there for a while, you've noticed, it's just an amazing group of people, and they are innovative and interested in their students, and just great teachers too. So it's a good group.
Yeah, I'm wondering,
questions, just yell.
Are you familiar with Quality Matters?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm wondering if any of the RTTP online courses have ever been sort of reviewed through that lens, if you know. Our university is very much pushing Quality Matters, so.
Yeah.
So is ours.
Yes. I'm not sure off the top of my head. We have had a lot of like people doing first year stuff and different kinds of things. We've also had some people who have been very involved in real rigorous academic research on reacting and its benefits and everything. There was a book published that had some articles in there. I posed that question on the lounge. I bet that there are. I'm not sure. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
But that's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. This has been really.
You're very, very welcome. It was nice to meet you, Vanessa.
Oh, it's nice meeting you too.
Yeah.
Well, y'all yell at me if you need anything, and check out that link. Check out that link to the Google Docs, because that'll give you some examples, and maybe that will help with some of the work that maybe it's been done and you don't have to do it again.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Can we get a copy of this, what we just did?
I recorded it, so let me try to figure out how I post that. I'm not exactly certain, but yes, absolutely.
Okay, great.
I can figure it out.
Yeah, no, this is much appreciated.
Yes.
Well,
thank you so much for taking a chunk of your Friday morning out to.
Oh, no problem. Me and Cisco are happy to do it.
Yeah.
I will talk to y'all soon, and yell if you have any questions, okay?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
Okay. Bye-bye.